Hi, I'm Brian Jones of Sky Magazine here in Wilmington, North Carolina, part of Sky Magazine's coverage of Eastern's 2013. I'm here with Zack Smith and Ian Toner. We saw a lot of exciting games today, guys, and one of the big teams we saw today was UCF right off the bat.
They came out hot. Their first round pool matchup was against Carleton. They ended up taking half to the tune of 8-2 or 8-3, I believe. Coach Andrew Rocca was doing a lot of experimenting with defensive lines, putting some of his bigger players that traditionally play offense on defense and giving them some quick strike capability on the turn. That being said, they did cool off throughout the rest of the day, suffering a surprising loss to Ohio, so it'll be interesting to see if they come out with some more fire tomorrow morning.
Central Florida moving on to quarters. Another one of the teams that we saw today, Minnesota, was very impressive. A team we weren't sure where they were. What do we see out of them?
Just a lot of patient offense and just ability to get open and create separation. Jason Tashida did a great job, as well as Josh Klein, and they were able to come out and win their pool, surprising a lot of people by taking down Oregon in the first game of the day.
A team that had a disappointing season so far, Colorado, had just underperformed at Pres Day, came to Stanford Invite, didn't really look good. Today they looked like they had an actual offense.
Yeah, I believe ever since 2011 when that class graduated, it was really about rebuilding, and it was kind of the Jimmy Mickle and Jackson Clore show. And really, today the offensive line only really featured James Mitchell at times. It did feature Tim Morrissey, but really Jackson Clore and Jimmy Mickle were primarily defensive line, even when it came to Universe Point against Florida State in that huge comeback. So Colorado is starting to look like a full roster, and they're looking very strong going into quarters tomorrow.
Tim Morrissey had one of the greatest plays of the day, getting about, 8 feet off the ground. I mean, that was incredible.
He did say that he felt like the FSU defender gave him a little bit of a lift, but it was pretty impressive. A Wilmington defender, excuse me.
So moving on tomorrow in quarters also is Oregon, a team that we expected to be here, but they suffered a surprise loss early on to Minnesota, which was one of the impressive teams. What did we see from Oregon that made the difference today?
So Oregon was doing a little bit of experimenting with Dylan Freechild being left to anchor the D-line, and Aaron Hahn given pretty much free reign over Oregon's O-line.
And typically we see Oregon coming out and dominating these early season tournaments. They won Stanford a couple of weeks ago. But this is a team that relies on energy, relies on their momentum, and they were up big on Stanford in pre-quarters, let Stanford crawl their way back in, and ended up being a much closer game than anyone really expected.
Pool D, we saw two teams really battle it out in the final game, Wisconsin versus UNC. What did we see from Wisconsin today that reminded us that they're still one of the top 4 teams?
Well, granted, they're powerful players, Brian Hart, Colin Camp, Dayu Liu, they all came out and they all played incredibly well. The defense of a lot of teams really stepped up at Eastern so far, but Wisconsin looked ready to battle against every team that showed up.
I would say UNC has one of the best handling cores here between Marshall Ward, Tristan Green, and John Nethercutt. They all have big play capability on both sides of the disc, and they're all able to do what's needed of them when they possess the disc, whether it's break the mark or send it deep. And when you got someone like Christian Johnson running things down, it's always going to go well for you.
At the end of the day, we had a surprise upset. North Carolina, Wilmington putting themselves in really good position. Zach, you saw the final point of that game. Walk us through what happened.
The final point really exhibited just as tight defense as possible from Carleton, but really strong and aggressive cutting from UNC Wilmington. And what it really came down to was Truman Nottingham finding Lamar beating Julian Charles-Walker to the cone in space. With that size advantage, it wasn't really that difficult for him, and that's what they did to close it out.
So at the end of the day, we had a lot of upsets, but there's always a big takeaway, and it sounds like Pittsburgh again took their defense to another level.
Pittsburgh took their defense to another level. Pat Earls was automatic on the turn, and to be honest with you, I was also impressed with their O-line, as a lot of people are a lot of the time. It's not just the Alex Thorne and Max Thorne show. It can be. Alex is hurt, and he hasn't been featured as much this tournament. There's been a lot of chemistry between Tyler DiGirolamo, Aaron Watson, and Michael Brenner. Brenner, who's becoming extremely comfortable behind and extremely dangerous behind the disc.
Zach, what was your biggest takeaway from the day?
Well, just touching on Pittsburgh really quick, I was really impressed with Marcus Dropshow. It seems like he's kind of jumping into the roles that were left by guys like Colin Connor and Hausman. That the person that they're going to rely on to take the hard matchups and play strong. He was up against Tommy Lamar when they were playing Wilmington, and I think he's going to fit nicely into that role. Despite going 1-2 in pool play, Mitch Sion played incredibly well for Ohio. He was always open in space, and he had great throws to space for his receivers.
Ohio doing themselves some favors too, playing close games, getting a win over Central Florida. That should put them in good contention for a bid. And it looks like Stanford may have played their way early on out of a bid, but a close result with Oregon late in the day put them back into contention. Tomorrow is going to be very exciting for the finals as we go through the quarters. Already a lot of upsets, and for those teams that need to get wins and get those bids. For Ian Toner, for Zack Smith, I'm Brian Jones. This is Sky Magazine's coverage of Eastern's 2013.